So you're there, but I'm looking at you, so it looks like I'm slightly buzz-eyed, but I'm not.
It's all right.
Staring at that, so.
No problem.
Okay, so thank you very much for doing the very first Behind the Lens video chat. Congratulations on the Even Up the Score album. Classic Rock, they said that they've really stepped up a level. The Marshville Times said this is the most Wayward Sons sounding album ever. And Rock and Load said a stellar and brilliant performance. Every track contained is beyond reproach, which it doesn't really get any better than that, really.
Wow. High praise indeed. What can I say?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, we're very, making records is very difficult. It does. In fact, it gets more and more complicated and more difficult the more I do, the more I make them. Because I think I see making albums through a prism of experience now. So I'm 30 years into this business, and which seems incredible to be able to say. It's nuts really, but that's the truth. I was a young man when I started making records, and I think the sort of youthful exuberance has long since departed. It's more about trying to make great technical, not technical recording. What I want to make convincing, authentic recordings, and that is the hardest thing to do that there is. Because technology these days is very, very easy to make music. Anyone can make music in their bedroom. As we know, it's a very simple process. If you've got Pro Tools or any of the DAWs, set up systems, software systems, it's relatively straightforward, and you can kind of cut corners. A lot of corner cutting making records, these days. Auto tune, tuning packages, cut and paste, putting things in time, all these sorts of things that were never present when I was making records when I was a young man. And I've learned over the years that the only thing that matters with making records is it's three things. It's the songs, and the songs. And the rest of it doesn't matter, but what does matter is the approach that you take to the recording. And I choose every time I make a record to lean into the performances, for it to be about performance based. So it's about the songs first, and then it's all about what performances we can bring to those songs. And so I avoid, as much as humanly possible, altering the files at all, and I get more and more precious about that, and I get more and more sort of fastidious about it, and so every time I go into making a record, I sort of take a deep intake of breath, thinking, right, okay, here we go. What we're going to do this time? How are we going to be convincing this time? Because I think that's what it's all about. It's about communicating ideas in the most authentic, most honest fashion you possibly can, without compromise. And I think this record probably is the purest version of that I've ever made.
Yeah.
Because I concentrated. So, and I said to the guys, look, we're in lockdown. All we can do is make this record. Let's spend the time that we've got making the, really, focusing on the songs, focusing on the message, focusing on the performances. And we didn't know how long we were going to take to make it. And I think the thing is, lockdown, at the time when lockdown happened, did any of us in the world know we were going to be essentially for the rest of the year out of the loop? So I think that was a bit of a shock, but we sort of utilized that time. I think, as it went along and it became obvious that that this was going to go on and on, we kind of relaxed into the recording. We sort of felt, I think we all felt that we could look at it from a distance, and we could view it from a different perspective than we normally would do. Because if I make a record normally, because the budgets are so tight these days, if I go and make a rock album with a band, whether I'm producing it or whether I'm making it myself, for Wayward Sons, usually you've got 2 to 3 weeks to do the recording in, right?
Okay.
And so it's a very short window, but this time that wasn't the case. We had an entire year to look at this record and get it right. And I do think that's what we did. We very carefully used that time, to maximize the possibilities,
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, as I say, I think everything you've just said actually proves right in the listening, and I think that actually comes through in the listening as well. And I think, like I say,
that's great to know. That's great. The reactions have been. I think the reactions have been I mean, you never know what people are going to say about making an album you put out. And I think because today, you know, with the amount of records and the amount of music that's released, it's almost like overwhelming. I find, you know, the sort of, you know, everything's so available, isn't it? Everything is immediately available to people. It doesn't matter. As soon as you put something out, people are commenting about it immediately. You know, it's not like it used to be back in the day where people anticipated an album being released, you know, in an entirely different way, and it was a massive event, and you had to go down to HMV and buy it, and all. You know, we know all these things. So these days, you kind of like what I try to do is I try to forget about what people are going to think about it, and I try and think about what I think about it more than anything else, because that's all I've got, you know, that's all we've really got, because I just know the moment it comes out there's going to be an instant reaction and an instant response to it, and so I guess the lesson really is to make sure that you're guarded, and what you're putting out you're completely happy with, and that's a challenge in itself, because people are all, I think these days, are chomping at the bit. Oh, we've got to get the stuff out. We've got to put the music out. You know, but what you're really doing is just joining the swamp, you know.
It's a lot of voices out there, isn't it?
You know, and so it's hard to get your head above the parapet. So my approach really is, the only chance you've got is to make an incredible piece of music or an incredible album, you know, or at least you think you have, and hope for the best. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think you've succeeded, Toby. I really do, and you know, I think it's brilliant. As I say, I was out this morning and I was listening to it again, and you know, the single track that you released was brilliant as well, and bloody typical.
Yeah.
Again, a great hook. So I kind of found myself going back to that one. I mean, as I say, you're talking about the events of 2020, and I think you really utilised it to the best of your ability, because not only have you released the Wayward Sons album, or you were producing the Wayward Sons album, you also did your own album.
Yeah, I mean, that was a kind of response to, you know, the lockdown situation. You know, I went online and started performing down my phone, you know, and doing the digital busking sessions, and it was wonderful, really, because it kind of gave me this opportunity to re-look at a lot of old songs, a lot of stuff I hadn't looked at and listened to for many, many years, especially obviously the Little Angel stuff, but also a lot of my solo stuff, you know, and it was quite extraordinary, really, because, you know, when we were, I mean, I'm sure it was the same for everyone, but I was waking up every morning thinking, I've got nothing to do today apart from one thing, you know. You know, apart from putting on the kettle and making a cup of tea, what am I going to do? You know, like, so it was like, right, well, I'm going to look back at all these songs, and I'm going to re-examine them, and because that's all. I had no demands, like orders. No one's banging on my door to go and do anything. You know, I couldn't even drive the car. You know, I wasn't allowed to go out, like we all were. You know, we're all in that situation. So it was So all I did was I just thought, well, no, I'm going to go down the rabbit hole, and I'm going to look at all this stuff again. And then so I was learning to play songs that I haven't played in some cases some of those songs had never been played live, you know, especially in the Little Angel stuff. And I can remember I was working on songs from the early albums, and even before Don't Pray For Me off the Big Bad EP, and even earlier than that, you know, sort of early demos and things. And as soon as I started relearning the songs, I remembered where I was when I wrote them. I mean, it was like a blinding flash of like memory. Oh my God, I was at my mum and dad's place there, and I remember it was that time of the year or whatever. So it was an extraordinarily cathartic experience, really, to kind of go back over all that stuff. And that included the solo stuff. So I kind of, through that whole period, I think, you know, you may know, I released a couple of albums that were specifically taken from the performances of those digital busking sessions. Right. Which was an extraordinary thing to do anyway. And I was very, very I was blown away by the quality that we were able to gather from that. But I kind of reached a point where I thought, well, you know what? There's a lot of this material a lot of people have never heard before, because a lot of it I'd put out myself independently with very little budget, with no record label. I'd just put it out myself. And so that's what the Viewfinder album became. It was really like a curated collection of songs of what I felt were some of the best of my solo stuff, and to an audience that perhaps had never heard of that material before. And so it was a really good way of just kind of connecting the audience to stuff that probably passed them by. And so I think a lot of these things joined up over the lockdown period for me. Revisiting Little Angels, putting out my own solo material again, it kind of, in a way, it sort of drew a line under it all. And I feel very, very privileged that I was able to do that, and people responded so positively,
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's fair to say that the album was 15 years in the making, wasn't it?
at least, yeah. I mean, yeah, because I started writing solo.
Oh.
Yeah, totally. And I started writing solo material. I think I've always been a very prolific writer. I mean, I've got I wouldn't even like to guess how many songs I've still got knocking around that I've never made it onto a recording. I was looking through my archive a couple of weeks ago, just because I'm anticipating doing another solo recording at the moment, and just looking for material and seeing what I've got knocking around. I think I thought I stopped counting after about 30 songs that I haven't used.
Yeah.
And it was just like, most of them are probably rubbish, but I mean, but I was still sort of quite surprised. But even after all this time, I've still got this like group of 30 tunes that have never been used, and some of which I thought I'd forgotten about completely. And I guess that's part of being artistic, that you just sometimes you don't spot it,
Absolutely. There was a track on the album which really caught my ear, and it was Back in the Day. And I think purely because, I mean, I don't know if it was intentional, but it had like that sort of 90s grunge sort of sound to it, almost like slightly Nirvana-ish with the bass and the kind of, the vocal delivery and stuff. Am I right in saying that? Was that the intention for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair response. I mean, I think the thing is with it, Simon, is like when I was writing this material, that particular song that you've chosen there is a good example of it. It was right in my mid-period where I wasn't really touring. I was working with other people. In fact, around that period is when I was working with the guys from Gun, and I was just writing stuff. I wasn't really thinking about why I was writing it. There wasn't like I've got an album to put out. I was just writing because that's the way it worked, and that's the way I work. And also, I just started working on Pro Tools, and Pro Tools is, it's not complicated, but if you've never used it before, you've got to get used to using it. And it's a steep learning curve to figure it out. So I found myself writing a lot of stuff just to figure out how to use Pro Tools. Yeah. But typically with me, once I kind of like start heading into a songwriting period or a songwriting process, it doesn't just happen. I don't just write one song. I'll often write 10 or 15, sometimes 20 songs, to try and figure out what I've got. And so that era was really kind of like, well, maybe I'll write a song a bit like, this kind of sub-pop era of the 90s, that sort of thing. So I think that's a good observation. I think really that song was a kind of, well, what would I do if I'd been in Nirvana, or if I'd have been in Soundgarden, or if whoever else, So it was kind of like a stylized response, really.
You touched on the Digital Busker sessions. Like I
said earlier. I did. We did two. We did the first. Basically, it was just like what I ended up doing was that I did 3 months. I think I did 12 or 13 shows in the first season of them, if you like. One every Thursday night, 8:15.
From where you are right now. Taking where you are right now. Yeah, I can see.
Exactly. So sort of crazy, really, in my kitchen, and I sort of, because the great thing about I know there's a lot of people talking in sort of low tones about Facebook at the moment for a number of reasons, but I got to say, when social media really works, it was in that situation for me, that connectivity, being able to sort of basically put my phone on a tripod, turn on the live button, and just play into it. And I didn't stop to think for a moment when we first started doing it that the audio would be usable, because I thought, I didn't even think about it. I'm thinking, how could it possibly be usable? But we ended up at the end of every session, the guy that works on my social media, Rob Town, he was downloading all of the files just to check them out and look at them and whatever. And he said to me, he says, some of these performances are really good, and I wonder if do you want to check out the audio and see what quality is? So I did do that. And the thing is, it was coming in at 16-bit audio, which is extraordinary for singing down your phones, which is like CD quality. So I've got a mate who's a mastering engineer who I use all the time. And I said to Simon, this guy, I said, look, will you look at the files and tell me if they're even remotely usable? Mm-hmm. And so he got back to me the day after and said, he said, you know what, weirdly, they're really good. And he said, actually, there's no distortion. It's nicely compressed. It's nice and loud.
Wow.
He said, all I need to do is EQ it slightly, and I can get a bit more bottom end in it, and I can make it sound a little nicer. But he said, really, surprisingly, it's really good. So I was looking at that, I was thinking, wow, this is incredible. So it just became a kind of natural process because everyone had responded to the live performances so positively. People were asking for the performances, so it was to us. It was like, well, okay, we'll do it then. You know, I mean, it was all driven by demand. You know, so I think when I kind of got it all together, we did an album on the first season, and then we did an album on the second season, which we did in this second lockdown. You know, so yeah, and loads and you know, loads of songs, loads of performances, and some stuff, like I say, that's never been performed ever. So I think for completists, it was it's quite essential, you know.
And people can buy that album off the website, off your Toby Jepson website.
Yeah, if you go to if you go to tobyjepsonofficial.com, it's available there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. I just wanted to go back to the photography aspect. Obviously, we were talking about the recording of the albums and stuff. I mean, I'm like a lover of reportage photography and the fly on the wall stuff, the black and white, you know, as it happens, and the candid stuff. As an artist, would you ever consider having a photographer present during those recording sessions to capture those moments, or is that something that doesn't really?
Well, no, I mean, I have done things like that before. I mean, you know, probably back in the Little Angels days, it used to happen quite regularly where you'd have a journalist turn up with a photographer and they'd hang out with you for a couple of days in the studio, and then you gave free rein to the photographer to wander around and just take pictures. That was very much a thing. You know, Kerrang used to do it quite a lot, where they do studio reports and blah blah blah. So that was a thing. We have done that in recent years as well. We did it with a photographer friend of mine called Tony Mottram, who was famous for shooting stuff for Kerrang back in the day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, Tony's been a good mate of mine for years. So we do it, and we have done it. You have to be very careful with that sort of thing because, you know, if you're in the heat of battle making a record, you're not often looking your best, you know, and all that sort of thing. So you have to be careful. I mean, not that I really, you know, honestly, not that I give a shit anymore. But
there's definitely an honesty to that kind of style of photography, isn't there?
Yeah, of course it is, but I think, you know, you do become. I think the cult of personality is such that, you know, when I joined the record industry, I was 19 years old. You know, you're obsessed with the way that you look, and you're obsessed with the worries of all that stuff, and you're constantly sort of become, you know, you're very, very aware of it, and you're constantly worrying about it, you know, because it just seems very important at the time. But of course, now these days, I'm 54. This is what you get, man. You know, this is what it is. So I'm not that bothered anymore, you know. But you know, it's more to do with really how you can continue the creative process without being interrupted, actually, if you know what I mean. But it can be a bit of an annoying someone shoving a lens in your face.
Of course, that's it. Yeah, I always use the long angle lens. I'll stay out of the way and just shoot inwards rather than being in your face.
And I'm sure, you know, you being the professional that you are, I'm sure that you'd be great. But I've had situations in the past where you've just people who don't understand the etiquette of it, and you know, it's you know, so I think it's a fine balancing act. But I do love the idea of people understanding what it is to be part of the processes behind the kind of, you know, pulling back the curtain on the wizard type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I've done podcasts about this very thing. You know, the Toby and the Whole Truth podcast is about revealing the realities of what it means to make records and be in the record industry. So I'm not anti it at all, you know.
Yeah. So obviously, taking the photography to the live aspect, the first three. Have you heard of the concept for the photographers at a live show? The first three and out. Are you aware of that?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, that always kind of used to frustrate me, really, because I'm like, I don't know who that benefit that is for. It certainly isn't for the band. I've never really understood. I think there was this perceived this concept that if photographers were in the pit for the whole of the set, then it would piss the band off. Well, I don't even notice who's in the pit when I'm playing. Well, that makes no difference to me at all.
I mean, apparently, I think the whole first three started. I think it was the rumor is it came from a Bruce Springsteen concert. And I don't know if it was Bruce Springsteen or the promoters that kind of decided it, and it's just something that's kind of snowballed from then on. I mean, I do kind of understand it, because obviously, you know, we're there between the crowd and yourself, and we don't want to be the distraction in between. You know, we're not the show, you are. So you have answered the question about are you aware of the photographers in the pit, and obviously, and no, you're not.
You learn as a performer, though, to ignore all that stuff. You know, the extraneous stuff on the outskirts, you know, you learn to ignore it. And you also learn to understand that it's important as well. And you let it happen. You know, I think where you come unstuck is where you alter your performance based on the fact that you're aware of it. You know, and I think that can happen with having camera crews on the stage when you're, you know, doing live broadcasts or whatever. And I can remember as a youngster feeling really concerned about that, you know, thinking, oh, I'm going to trip over them, or they're going to be in the way, you know, or actually overperforming for the cameras, which is the worst aspect of it. Actually, you look like, you know. So I think you learn. It's just experience, you know. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, I'm very choosy. I mean, I don't let it happen all the time, because I don't think I think the image, photographic image today is more potent than it's ever been before in lots of ways, probably less so in other ways. It's less romanticized, but it's definitely more out there, more of it, more available. The techniques are better. There's some far better photographs being taken in lots of ways than ever before. That doesn't mean to say that it doesn't have, you know, the iconic nature of what it can represent sometimes, but I do think it's been, just like music has, it's been reduced. You know, the whole thing of social media has reduced I suppose the capacity for wonderment. You know, I think it's been reduced. You know, because if you think back to those days in Kerrang or the NME or any of these big newspapers, where they were the Bibles for music followers. You know, so whenever you opened up Kerrang, I remember it as a kid. You know, I used to rush down every Tuesday when the Kerrangs used to come out, when they were weekly or bi-weekly when they first started. And I used to go down there and I'd be peeling through every picture told a story, really important, you know, like, what's Ozzy looking like this 1 month? You know, is he fat or is he thin? You know, that sort of thing, you know, whatever, you know, that sort of thing. And then, but you know, always amazing to see a fantastic picture. I'm a bit of a sucker for the big wide angle stuff, and I love the fisheye look, you know. And I remember seeing a picture of Steve Harris in Iron Maiden, taken by Ross Alphin at the front of the stage in a massive fisheye lens, and whole of the stage was captured behind, and he looked like a god, you know, with his bass and all that. And those things are massively influential when you are young, and also because they were the only pictures you saw, they became absolutely imprinted on your memory, you know. And so I still remember that picture, you know. I don't think that happens anymore. I think these days we're just flicking through our cameras, our phones, aren't we? It doesn't matter anymore. It has less impact.
I think photographs are quite disposable now, aren't they? Because everybody's a photographer now.
Everyone pretends to be a photographer, but of course it's the same thing as being everyone pretending to be a musician or pretending to be an actor or whatever else. You know, you can pretend all you want, but if you haven't got the experience, the skill, you know, the longevity, then really what you really are is just entering what I call the swamp. You know, there's a massive swamp of people out there that have got pretensions. You know, I mean, that's always been the case. But like I always say about rock and roll, if you had pretensions to be a rock and roll star back when I was a kid starting out, you never got out of the pub. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's all you were doing. You were just playing your local pub. Now you can have a fantastic looking website and pretend you're Bon Jovi or whoever. You know, it's like, it doesn't mean to say you are Bon Jovi. So there's a sort of, it's about, it still remains the same. I still believe that the cream does rise to the top. I hate it when people say, oh no, it's not the same. And of course it doesn't, you know, people can pretend. So no, they can't, because actually it's really easy to see through the bullshit. If someone's got genuine talent, fine, absolutely, I'll be the first person to go, that person's really talented. I've never heard of them before, but they're amazing, whether it's taking photographs, being a musician, being a filmmaker, whatever. If someone's genuinely just got something, then absolutely bring it on. But it doesn't mean to say that the 98% of everybody else who's taking photographs or writing a song have that right to call themselves experience, because they haven't got the experience. You know what I mean? It's kind of that's always my bugbear, really. Experience still counts for an awful lot. It really does.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, well, we're talking of experience. Obviously, you've been you're an established musician. Even with all the experience behind you, do you still get anxious before a show? And do you have any sort of, you know, does the band have any kind of like routines or rituals before they take to the stage?
It's a very good question. It's hard to answer because it just depends what the situation is. I mean, like, you know, going onto stages in this we did half a dozen. No, it wasn't even half a dozen. I think. Well, no, it was about half a dozen festivals this summer. You know, the first festival's back after this COVID period, and I did the first gig back. I mean, it was ridiculous. The first gig back on a stage for me personally was playing in front of 5,000 people at Steelhouse Festival in Wales with just my acoustic guitar.
Wow.
And I followed Chris Barras, you know, the blues rock guy, you know, and he just come off this incendiary sort of blues explosion, you know, like this, you know, searingly sort of like heavy blues thing, you know, like, and I'm stood at the side of the stage with my acoustic guitar and ready to go and play. And I'm like, I wonder what this is going to be. You know, I wandered out, you know, sort of wandered out with my acoustic guitar to pretty much complete silence, you know, and sort of like tried to play some Little Angel songs, because essentially what had happened is that Wayward Sons, our drummer, had been pinged with the track and trace, and we were expected to play that slot I was doing, but we had to cancel it. In fact, we ended up moving it to the next day because it's a really long story, but essentially he got out of his situation the day after, and so we were able to. Another band got pink track and trace, and so we moved into their slot. I mean, it was bedlam. It was bedlam. But essentially, what happened was that the promoters went, "Oh my God, we've got this slot missing. Dude, can you play an acoustic slot?" So I went on and played about, I think, 50 minutes of Little Angel stuff. Forgot all the words. Forgot the chords. I mean, I forgot the words to Womankind.
Nightmare, isn't it?
Mate, I forgot the words to Womankind, the biggest hit the band ever had, and it was absolutely crazy. I mean, I did, and I was like a rabbit in the headlights, and so I was panicking, that's one of the most nervous I've ever felt in my entire career was that show. I really did. I was genuinely shitting myself. Whereas, and I think that's just because of the situation. You know, I'd spent so much time playing online. I'd got used to just turning up with my acoustic guitar in my own kitchen and not having to go out and do anything. You know, so. It was a very weird thing, you know. But as a general rule, I would say that for much of my life, I've felt that I said this to my wife literally yesterday, funnily enough. It's funny you should bring it up. But I've always felt that the stage is home. That word home, always I associate it with being on a stage. I've played so many gigs. I've done so many tours. It's just that's where I perform.
Yeah.
So that's what it feels like to me. So I never feel nervous. I always feel I have a kind of, I guess, a sort of energy thing where you sort of get a little anxious, but it's nothing to do with nerves. It's more about, I want to get out there and get on with it sort of thing. I mean, that's changed over the years. I mean, I feel less inclined that way these days. I mean, but that's just because I'm old.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm feeling sort of, you know, are my hips going to out?
Well, the follow-up question to that was going to be, what's your most memorable gig? I think you've just answered it all for the wrong reasons, though, I guess, yeah?
Well, maybe so. I mean, but I've got loads of memorable gigs. I mean, you know, playing Wembley Stadium with Bryan Adams back in 93, whenever it was. You know, selling out the Marquee Club in Wardour Street, you know, legendary Marquee Club, selling that out back in 89 or whenever it was, 88, 89. Hammersmith Odeon, you know, the first time we ever played Hammersmith and sold that out, that was extraordinary. I mean, I'll never forget that. So many gigs, so many, you know, so much time, you know, I've gone through, you know. I mean, one of my favourite ones was playing. I sang "Catch the Rainbow" when I was in Dio's Disciples. I sang that in front of Wendy Dio at a packed venue in Cleveland, in Ohio, in America. It was the House of Blues. And it was the first time she'd come on the tour to watch the band play, and we were just doing Ronnie hadn't long since passed, and I was asked to be part of that process. And I sang the only love song the guy ever wrote, really, in truth.
That's a privilege.
To his wife.
God.
He'd written that song. He'd written that song for Wendy, and I sang that song. And I remember she was up in like a box up on the right hand side as I was singing it, and I caught sight of her, and she was like in tears, you know. And that was a real moment. I mean, to have that privilege to sing that song in that environment and that situation, absolutely spine tingling. I remember a similar thing playing Download with Dio's Disciples, and I sang "Long Live Rock and Roll," and to an audience of 50,000, Rainbow and Dio and Black Sabbath fans, with a lot of the audience in tears because it wasn't long since Ronnie had passed. And so it depends what the situation is, but there's sometimes the gigs that you think aren't going to be the ones are the ones that really, really get you. Often the ones with the least amount of people in the audience are the ones that are the most difficult, that sort of thing, So it's kind of hard to put your finger on. I mean, I've got so many of them. I mean, I just, in all honesty, I think the simple answer is I've always appreciated when anyone turns up, frankly, and just he's happy to be there. I think it's an extraordinary privilege, really.
So as when you're on stage and you're kind of doing your thing, what's your thoughts on the smartphone generation? I mean, when everyone, all you can see is this, everyone watching the show through the phone. How does that affect your performance, or does it affect your performance? Or
well, it doesn't really affect my performance, but I do find it frustrating. I mean, I think the very fact that you're finishing a song, and especially when it's a new song, and you may be performing it for the first time, and then instantly that song is brought, is put out on Facebook or something. You have no control over that. It does two things, I think, really. It weakens and lessens the impact. And so I think in a general way, it is responsible for removing a lot of the magic and a lot of the mystery about what rock and roll and live music's about for me. And that's one of the things, as a kid, I used to love. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember going to see Rainbow in Leeds, Queen's Hall when I was a kid, one of the first gigs I ever went to. And I queued up with that whole, thousands of other people who wanted to go and see that gig. And my anticipation of going to see that show was not in any way influenced by anything other than my love of that band and wanting to see that band play and knowing their records. So when they came on stage, the majesty of that thing, the music, the lights, the power, the sound, the fact that they looked like aliens to me, I didn't even think they were real. It was this kind of untouchable magic scenario of beauty and mystery, and that's what I loved about it. I didn't want to know who they were intimately. I didn't want to know what fucking they'd had for their breakfast, or what their inside leg measurement was, which is what everyone seems to be obsessed with these days. Yeah, I don't understand why that's been eroded, that's been removed, totally removed. Now it seems to be important that we know every single detail, and I think that's wrong. I think it's removed more than it's given. People say, "Oh yeah, but people love to get so close to their favorite artist now." I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. I have a difficult relationship with it, and that might sound like a kind of a contradiction in terms because of what I've done over the lockdown, but I think the other thing that it does, and the other thing that's the counter of that is that the digital phone generation and the gig-going smartphone generation have allowed access in ways never before. And so even though I don't particularly enjoy the removal of the mystery stuff, I do recognize and completely understand the communication level of it and how that then draws in a bigger audience and gives people a chance to see the reality of it. Absolutely. It's just that sometimes you don't want people to see the reality of it because you might have a bad throat or you you forgot the words or whatever. And that happens and always has happened. And so I think there's a kind of fire. The thing of what it used to be, there was a firewall then. Now the firewall's completely gone. There is no firewall. And maybe that is a good thing. Maybe it's 50-50. I don't know.
I suppose, like you say, whether it be a photograph or someone puts a video on there, it's huge exposure for the band, isn't it? Because it gets shared, and people see, it brings new audience and people.
I mean, you'd think so, wouldn't you? You would think so, but the trouble with it is that it doesn't kind of work like that. And we found in recent years that the algorithms close lots of this stuff down, and you ultimately only end up reaching the same amount of people you would normally reach anyway. Kind of almost like in a bubble, So it's very hard to get beyond your borders. This is one of the kind of major kind of. I think one of the sort of realizations for a lot of bands who think that the digital world is their savior. We can release music, man. Anyone can get it. The trouble is, not everyone does get it. And, you know, you end up sort of really working within a very, like what we call the cul-de-sac. I mean, this is one of the words they use in the music business now, is the rock and roll cul-de-sac. Every band gets stuck in its own cul-de-sac. You just basically playing to the gallery all the time. The same people are putting out the same photographs, you know, the same people are listening to the same music. And so you kind of feel it's very easy to become obsessed with that. And you think, oh, yeah, man, we've got such a big audience. But the reality is you probably haven't. And so it's a kind of crazy world. You know, I think... not so difficult for someone like me who's got a bit of a history, but I think for a young band that thinks that the digital realm is the answer to their prayers, they're sadly mistaken. It doesn't work like that. But you know, what you do hope is that the exposure levels and the easy access to all of this stuff just provide a possibility of getting beyond that border. You know.
So you mentioned there. You know, obviously, okay. So do you actually pay quite a lot of attention, or do you pay attention to stuff that you see online of yourself? Like, for example, on Instagram, if people are shooting, whether it be people in the pit or people in the audience, do you pay attention to the stuff that you tagged in?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, we've got social media people that look after that stuff for us anyway.
Right. Okay.
You know, so we've got, you know, people that listen to pretty much everything that comes in, and we've got, you know, as a guy that we pay specifically, and say with Wayward Sons is a good, you know, for the moment, that is charged with the task to keep an eye out for anything that's really, really good that we can repost and we can comment on, because, you know, not all of it is, of course. Sometimes it's blurry photographs and it looks rubbish, you know. Yeah. But sometimes there are those fantastic pictures, and there are those moments, you know, where a bit of video is shot and it sounds great, and you just happen to capture the band in a great moment. And we have reused that stuff. We've asked for permission from those people that own that material, you know, the fans, if we can reuse it. And so there are benefits, of course, and there are, you know, I do like, and I think, you know, I'll be honest, I think that's one of the magics of it all, is that there is that possibility that you can find material you wouldn't ordinarily have been able to use, you know. So I think there are pros and cons, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to photographs especially, what do you look for in a photo if you're going to share a photo?
I'm looking for the personality.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've always felt that. I mean, a lot of the photographers we used back in the day, you know, like in studios, I mean, there was a guy called Paul Cox, who was a fashion photographer who worked with a lot of, he worked with people like George Michael and people like that, you know, and he was a very successful fashion orientated, you know, finger on the pulse, you know, capture the zeitgeist type guy, you know, and he used to shoot photographs for everything from Elle to, and then, you know, whoever else, you know. And I remember we had a conversation with Polydor at the time, and they sort of said, what do you want to promote? You know, how do you want to be perceived? And we all sort of said, I think quite smartly, that we wanted to have photographs taken of us that were not normal, weren't the ordinary rock and roll pictures. Because it's very easy to stick your finger up at the lens and go like that, innit? And look like a rock band. Yeah. But we weren't into that. You know, we were middle-class boys, you know, and we had I think we understood aesthetics. You know, I was an art student, you know. You know, it was one of those where I was very much into that idea of it being classy and as much, you know, high quality as we possibly could. And so we ended up employing those kinds of photographers, you know. So Paul became a very regular photographer of ours, and we were always looking for that. He always used to say to us, you know, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was always like, you know, I'm trying to find the personality in you guys. I want the picture to depict who you are as people, not just a group of lads sat there, sort of thing, you know. So, and I always got that. I think, no, that's very true, you know. And so I still look for that. I still look for that. How do we create an image that tells the story of the people, you know, and of the moment that you're in? Doesn't always work. We've had some disasters, you know, we really have. And as you get older, it's tougher because you don't look the way that you did before. And, you know, I mean, me cutting my hair, for instance, was some sort of cause celeb, you know, like, you know, because people have, that's the thing, that there's the strength of the image though. That's the whole point, isn't it? People have seen me with my long tresses since I was about 19 years old, you know. Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is that I've had short hair a few times in my life, you know, when I was still an artist, but because I wasn't massively in the public eye, people didn't kind of spot it, you know. So the moment So I cut my hair, and it's like I'm getting emails of people saying, "Oh my God, what have you done?" You know,
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. You know,
I'm like, well,
as if you're their product.
yeah, I've just cut my hair off. Doesn't change my voice and the songs I'm writing, does it? You know, crazy. But you learn over the years to understand that. You know, you understand the power of the image, and there are, you know, let's be honest. I mean, there have been some incredible photographs taken, historically important photographs. I think about the one with the Clash, you know, smashing the guitar on the stage for London's Calling and all that, and you know, loads of great, you know, the Dave Lee Roth bending over backwards on stage and on Van Halen 1 and all these sorts of things, and Pete Townsend smashing up his guitar. And there are images that we all know that are indelibly marked in the history of rock and roll that are absolutely part of the fabric and are as important as the music. No two ways about it. And I still believe the photographic image is as important as it ever was. It's just, I just think there's so much of it. It's hard to find it a lot of the day now, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I completely agree. So if you're kind of like, if you've got on tour and you've got your photographer or your particular photographer, Paul, or a photographer who's either on tour with you or in a show and they're on a AAA pass or anything like that, even behind the scenes, are you up for them being part of the action, or do you kind of like prefer them to kind of do their thing but just keep their distance?
No. I mean, you know, like I said, you know, it's the same thing with being in the studio. I mean, I do allow that, you know, but I think it's within reason, you know. Because I think, you know, if you stood on a stage doing a sound check and someone takes a photograph of you and you're not looking your best, and it's a technical going on, you know. It can go one or two ways. It can look really fucking cool, and it can be like, oh yeah, these guys are, you know, this is behind the curtain, or it can just look a bit crap, you know. So I think it really just comes down to what you capture. I mean, you know, like you know more than anyone, you know, I would say that, you know, if I always know when a photographer's really, really good, he never stops the shutter. The shutter is whirring all the bloody time, right? Because he knows as well as I do, it's not that perfect shot. You're not going to find it, but you might, out of 500 photographs, you're going to find 2 or 3 that are usable. It's that sort of thing. And I do think that definitely does work. I think if your photographer is smart enough, they stay out of the way, but they take the photographs in the right moment. They kind of have an instinct for it, and they know when the environment's right, when the mood maybe is right, you know, and is kind of smart enough to press that shutter, you know. And I do think that's part of the skill of you guys, is that understanding the aesthetic, understanding the moment, understanding the mood, and being able to be in the background and not get in the way. I mean, I do think that is important. You know, you don't want a lens in your face. It's nothing more that will. I mean, that doesn't happen to me very often now, but that would piss me off. You know, if someone's stuck in a lens in my face, you say, no, I don't want that to happen. You know, but I think that's the difference between, you know, like I say, experienced photographers that have everything about them. I mean, one of the things I always sort of think is that you can kind of tell when a photographer really knows what he's doing with how many cameras he's got strapped around him. You know, if they've got like 80 of them and they're like weighed down by the thing, you know, like, it usually means they haven't got a clue what they're doing. But if the guy's got 2 and it's one's a wide and one's a telephoto, you know what I mean? It's just that you can just kind of tell, and it's no fuss. There's no messing about. You know what I mean? I think you kind of know. You know,
I think it's also as well. I think it's also just down to trust as well. At the end of the day, legendary photographer Jim Marshall. There's a classic, iconic shot that he took of Jimi Hendrix during a sound check, and Jim Marshall always used a 30mm lens, so you got to really get into somebody's face. And he just literally went up to Jimi Hendrix during the sound check and stood right in front of him and just snapped away at him. And there's this look that Jimi Hendrix gives Jim Marshall, but it's a connection as well, and it's just. I'll put it up on the screen. I'll look for it and I'll put it on the screen.
I think that's a really good example. I think the other photographer I'm a big, well, there's 2 really big fans of, is Annie Leibovitz, and I love Mick Rock's stuff. And I think Mick Rock is a photographer from that same period, late 60s going through into the 70s. You know, you think about the stuff he did with Bowie and the stuff he did with Freddie Mercury and Queen and things like that, and Lennon, and you know, and all these amazing iconic figures. he just knew, and it's like the one thing I think about the image, whether it's the moving image or the still image through a lens, is that there are those people who just know how to frame, and there are those people that know how the background it has a photographic feel to it, and even if it doesn't, they'll know how to create that feel. And I always remember Ridley Scott saying that he looks at every single image in his eyes, in front of his eyes, as if it's cinematic. He said, I can see the beauty in anything in front of me. But I think that's the point. I think if you have that imagination, if you have that ability, then a great photographer like Mick Rock can make Freddie Mercury's crappy bedsit flat in Notting Hill, wherever he lived, look like the world of rock and roll, even though it's just a crappy wallpaper and a shitty chair. You know what I mean? But that's to do with framing and having an imagination and knowing when to press the shutter. And I think that's where the talent comes in. You know what I mean? I think that's the bit, you know, and the lighting, and, you know, of course, and knowing when. And I do find it very fascinating. I do think Mick Rock, as a great example, is one of those people that could make shit look like Shinola, you know.
I mean, the thing with Wayward Sons as well is that all the guys are very unique in their look, and they're all photographic in their own look. I mean, obviously you've got Sam with the hair, you know, and you've got yourself with your participation. You've got Phil Martini. I love that name on drums. What a great look he's got, and obviously and then Dave Kemp until recently. But yes,
I mean that. You know what? Again, it's all about capturing the personality, isn't it? I mean, you know, I don't say I've never said to a musician in my life, right, let me see your personality. They either got one or they haven't. You know what I mean? And it's part of being a musician or an artist is that it often is effervescing out of you. It's coming out of you no matter what. And then it's how that then applies itself to a group of people. How do you bring that all together? There's a sort of unwritten. There's magic that happens in bands, you know. When good bands, there's magic that you can't talk about. You don't know what it is. You can't talk about it because you don't know what it is, you know. And it's a sort of tendril thing. It's sort of connective tissue in the ether that somehow exists on a stage between all of you. And if the magic is happening, and that communication between the 5, 4, 3, how many band members there are in the band is really there. It happens without you knowing it. And then if someone's very smart with a camera in front of it, presses the shutter at the right moment, when all that energy is dispersing and moving out, then you will get something. Because I genuinely believe it's in. I think it's in the magic. There is some magic there in the air. It's in the very fabric of the environment. And I say that without feeling stupid, because I know it to be true. You know, there's a lot more about performance that's to do with the physicality. It's to do with the magic inherent in the atmosphere.
Absolutely. And then Nick on bass really knows how to use the space as well, doesn't he? He really kind of goes for it. I mean, I've shot you guys 3 times, I think Stone Deaf in 2018. Was it 2019? Yeah, 2019 was the first time I shot you guys.
Yeah.
And then I shot you at Leeds O2, and I can't remember who you were opening for, but you were then, I can't remember. And then
Steel Panther, maybe?
No, Steel Panther was in Manchester. I shot you in Manchester at the Manchester Victoria Warehouse.
It probably would have been Saxon, then I would have thought then, because we did some gigs with Saxon, didn't we? So that would have been Leeds, maybe.
So anyone sort of like shooting Wayward Sons for the first time, what would you say? What would the advice be, or what can they expect from shooting Wayward Sons purely from a photograph?
Oh goodness me, that's an hard one. I would say, for me, do you know what I don't see enough of? I don't see enough of all of the band. I think if I had any desire, it would be to have, you know, more capturing of all the elements of the band in one photograph.
Well, because you're a band at the end of the day,
yeah. But I love kind of skewing the perspective as well. That's why I always love wide angle lenses, and I love the fisheye. You know, I think if you can kind of, you know, some of my favorite images of rock and roll bands are, I remember there's a famous Rolling Stones one, and I can't remember who shot it, but there's a famous one of them on stage, might have been Altamont or somewhere, where Keith Richards is right in the front of the shot, and he's like, I don't think he's looking at the lens, but he's looking, and he's really, really close up, you know. But then you got Jagger in the middle cavorting, and then you can see Charlie Watts with his sticks in his hair, and then and they're all in a moment, but it's captured, but it's just got this fantastic sense of perspective about it. You get the whole environment, you get the whole thing, you get the sense of the energy of the band, and it all in one moment, And I think if I have any more, I think that's probably to do with circumstances, because quite often, like someone like yourself, you're only in the pit, so it's difficult. I know that. But like whenever I've had a photographer on stage and I've got them in the wings, for instance, I always say, look, get your fucking wide angle lenses on there. If you've got a fisheye, use it. Let me see that. I want to see the environment, how we're relating to that environment. So I think perhaps that, don't be afraid to shoot wider and do big stuff, because that's really what we're after. All bands want to be regarded and looked at as a big thing. We want to be demonstrative. We want it to feel wide and big and powerful. And I think that in itself has as much personality as the close-up stuff trying to capture someone's expression, for instance.
I think that's as a photographer. I think what I've done is something you come to learn, especially during live performance, is learning to anticipate. I mean, there's so many shots that I see, and I was exactly the same when I first started. It was just literally the singer in front of the mic, or the guitarist doing his thing, and it was you were capturing the performance, not the moments in between the performance, if that makes sense. And that's now what I try and go for, and that's what I aim for when I'm shooting.
Yeah, totally. And I think if you, and also, I mean, it improves. I think with when a photographer gets a relationship with the band. I mean, I think not that I'm a particular fan of his photographs entirely, but I think the Ross Halfin relationship that he has with certain bands, like Iron Maiden, for instance, where he's there all the time, and they just give him carte blanche to shoot anything. Well, he'll know the show, so he knows when Yannick's going to throw his guitar in the air, and he can fire off 15 shots with and get that moment where the cable's twirling at the right, you know what I mean? So I think it comes down to that, doesn't it? Like sometimes you're lucky if you're going into a situation as a fresh photographer into a band you've never shot before, and you're just taking a chance, and it's pure happenstance that you're going to get something that's unusual, I would say. But if your relationship with a band and you build a relationship and you shoot them over time, then I think you build a different kind of thing, you understand, and I think that's probably where it probably becomes more potent, more driven as a person, set of personality-driven pictures, because you understand it,
So from a band's perspective, what do you think can make or break a relationship with a photographer? You were talking about relationships. What do you think can make or break that relationship?
Well, I mean, oh goodness me, another good question. I think when you said early on about using the word trust, I think that's really, really important. I mean, I think that, and I mean this with the greatest respect. Photographers don't make a band's career.
No,
they make their own career.
Of course.
But you see, let's just qualify this a minute. Back in the 80s, they used to say that if certain photographers took your photograph, that could make the difference between you making it and not making it. They did. Kerrang used to say that. Oh well, no, we'll get Ross. Oh no, we won't send Halfin because Ross Halfin because you're not big enough yet. It's all that sort of thing. Because they used to think that they were the gods. They used to think that they were the kingmakers, and I've never believed that. Because if the band aren't good enough, if the band aren't performing, if they don't have the songs, if the record label, what I mean, that seems ludicrous to me. I think it's part of it. I think if you have a great photograph taken by a world-beating photographer that's got massive track record and has all this history, and you happen to perform great, but you've got a single in the charts and your album's doing well, all those things combined together definitely will help each other. But I don't think the relationship between the band and the photographer needs to be anything other than an appreciation of each other's position, if you know what I mean. I think as long as the photographer is respectful, fully understands that the band have to do their thing in their way, because you've got to remember that bands are completely different. I'm a very affable, very amiable, very easy to get on with person. I've never met anyone I haven't got on with really, unless they piss me off, and then I don't work them anymore. But that's very rare, because I think I welcome people and I'm happy to do that. But I do know bands who are anti all of this stuff, because they're nervous, because they are inherently difficult people. and they want to make the situation difficult for some strange reason that they think it adds a bit of an edge or something. In reality, all it really does is make everything difficult. And it's not an edge. It's just difficult. And so I think the respect thing is massively important. Because it's the band, we're there to perform, and the photographer's there to capture those moments. And so I would say that there are guys that I use consistently that are people that I know I have a good relationship. Because at the end of the day, we can have a laugh with each other. And when it's all over and we're stood around, there's no poncing about. We're just talking about whatever, type of thing. So I'm very much into building those relationships with people where we're just normal, because we're just ordinary people, really. There's nothing special about anyone, really, is there?
No, absolutely, and that's something I've kind of come to learn. So through my time in radio and stuff like that, and I've worked and met with so many people, and it just kind of over time that kind of illusion just kind of crumbles, and we're just all regular people.
Because if you're an unpleasant person, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you play a guitar or you're welding metal. If you're unpleasant, you're unpleasant. It's nothing to do with your profession.
Yeah,
it really isn't. I think the trouble with the entertainment business is it has this perceived idea that it's really important. Well, actually, if you put it next to someone who's carrying out heart surgery or looking after people with Alzheimer's,
that's exactly what I think.
It's absolutely nothing.
Absolutely.
They're the heroes, really. Actually, we should have posters on the sides of bus stops with surgeons that are saving people's lives, not people like me.
Yeah,
I believe that, but it's, of course, that's never going to happen, because
I think that was almost like Ricky Gervais's approach, wasn't it, when he did the Golden Globes? He said you're just all a bunch of privileged people. You know what I mean? There's nothing special about whatsoever, and that was his whole attack.
And the only people that believe that are the people that are in that environment, and it's self-propagating load of old bollocks. And I've been in this game so long to see upsides down, up. I've seen every angle, and it's the truth. The trouble is unfortunately this business attracts pillocks. And there are a lot of them. And my training as a person over my life has been to try and navigate my way through the maze of all that, because you can come up against situations that would turn most normal people's hair white.
Yeah.
Because of the way that people behave in this business, because this crazy, stupid business allows for bad behavior. In some respects, it actually promotes bad behavior. If you're not behaving like that, then you're probably not the right kind of character, man. All that stuff, and it's rubbish. It's absolute, total rubbish.
Yeah, I think the higher up the ladder you go, a lot of people don't hear no quite a lot, do they? So that kind of just alters their perspective on everything, really, doesn't it?
It alters your perspective when you're a musician and you're having to sort of try and make a living. And here's the thing: 99% of musicians out there are scraping a living.
Yeah,
they are. I'm not a wealthy guy. No, I'm really not. I've made a living, just about, and I've been very, very lucky and very, very privileged to be able to call myself a musician on a daily basis. That to me is making it. It's not driving a diamond-encrusted Rolls Royce, wearing gold shoes. It's the reality of what does it mean to be a musician. Well, for me, being a musician is being a creative person that has the privilege of being able to talk about things narratively. It's your outward expression of your inner turmoil when you're artistic, really. That's the reality of it. And so it's a very tough life to lead anyway, because it's self-analyzing all the time. And so, when you exert that and you push that outward, when you get into the rock and roll business, actually a vast majority of us are quite delicate people, are quite sort of like insecure and that sort of thing. And this is very, very true. So everything else that surrounds that, being on stage, having a photographer taking your picture, having someone filming you, all of these things impact on you, and so then then it kind of either comes unstuck or you manage to deal with it.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing for me is a vast majority of people that behave badly, by and large, in the record industry are not the performers. Yes, there are obvious ones, we know that, but actually most of the bad behavior I've seen for people that are not actually on a stage or in a studio writing a song, there are the other people. There are the other people that surround it.
Yeah.
That without putting too fine a point on it.
What's we're just going to just kind of wrap it down now. Obviously, all the members of the band Wayward Sons, you've all got outside projects. You know, I think you've got Phil, who's the drummer for Down and Outs.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Sam, who's Land Sharks, and I think another band, and yourself, you do your solo stuff. So outside, what is the best thing about being in Wayward Sons for you or for the band? What keeps bringing you together?
I think that we like each other. I think we have an understanding. You know, we have an understanding between us ourselves that and we've all been through the ringer. Apart from Sam, who was, you know, this is his first, you know, major project. But weirdly, Sam's probably the most sensible out of us all. You know, I mean, you know, but like me, you know, me, Nick and Phil specifically, you know, we've all been in bands before. I mean, you know, me more than any of them. I've had the most amount of experience in lots of ways, certainly in terms of like, you know, the sort of success levels, you know, independent success levels. But, you know, Phil's been in lots of bands. You know, he's in Spirit Destiny as well as the Down and Outs, and he's played in lots and lots of projects. He's a session drummer. You know, there's nothing Phil doesn't know about being in the record business. Same thing with Nick. You know, Nick was Chrome Molly, and he's written songs for other artists, and you know, they're all very, very, very talented, very credible, very sensible people who understand the environment. And so that to me is why this band works. It's because I don't have to teach anybody anything. You know what I mean? I don't have to try and lead anyone through the processes. And what's great about Sam is that he recognises his lack of experience, and he's more than willing to take our experience and our word for it when we're trying to explain something to him, for instance. You know, so he's a very, 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 very smart kid, Sam. You know, he's a very talented musician, but he's also, more than anything else, he's a lovely human being who really understands and has got a great deal of grace about him. You know, so
yeah. I mean, I'm associated with Sam through another band that he plays with, the Land Sharks.
The guys that they're part of
you've got Mikey Shiraz is the lead singer. You've got you know, the drummer from Embrace, Steve.
I mean, it's based in the guys from Embrace, isn't it? Sorry, yeah, of course. So yeah, you know, I mean, and you know, they're you know, I think, you know, Sam's an unusual character. Sam is wise beyond his years, but he's a lovely, lovely lad. So I think it's the relationships, the reason why we come back. But more than anything else, actually, from a point of view of me, because I'm the kind of the leader, and a lot of the reason why I did this project in the first place was to allow myself the chance to do all the things I wanted to do with rock and roll music out after the Little Angels split up. Even though I went through some tumultuous periods and trained, did all sorts of things, the reality is that Wayward Sons is as close to the music that I've always wanted to make ever, and that's why. And that vehicle is a great vehicle for that, you know.
Awesome. So what, in terms of like inspiration and stuff like that, what's on your playlist at the moment?
Doesn't really change much, you know.
Yeah.
Doesn't really change much. I'm very much modern music wasn't made for me. No. It really wasn't. I'm not of this era. My era was the music I listen to still to this day is the stuff that I grew up with, really. I'm still listening to Bowie. I'm still listening to Queen. I am still listening to Motley Crue. I'm still listening to you know, Blondie. You know,
is Free in there anywhere?
Ian Dury and the Blockheads. Yeah, a bit of Free. Not so much the blues stuff, really. I used to love early Whitesnake, and I used to love Led Zeppelin, but that's about as blues as I get, really. I mean, I've never really been a massive fan of the British blues explosion, to be honest. Yeah. I've always been far more influenced with the sort of more, I guess, the more alternative edge to it. I mean, I love punk rock. I absolutely loved the period after punk started to dissipate and it became the new wave. So, you know, Blondie, Psychedelic Furs, the Knack. You know, all those bands all that came out of America, and then of course the British version of it, Duran Duran, and you know, the Police and bands like that. They were as much influence on me. I mean, you know, Elvis Costello, one of my biggest favorite artists of all time. You know, those people who influenced me probably more than hard rock did, actually. Certainly from a songwriting point of view.
Yes,
so I've always been drawn to that.
Certainly diverse taste and eclectic taste, which
Yeah,
is
because I've never look. I'll say this as a final parting shot. I've never regarded music as being bracketed. I don't understand why people want to put it in a bracket. I just think it's it's almost like a kind of strange mania that is. It's like we have to say it's something. Oh my God, if you don't have listen to that kind of music, then you're not that kind of fan. I've never been anything other than just a music fan.
If you like it, you like it.
Absolutely. I mean, I love Barbra Streisand. I love ABBA. I love. Like I say, I love Duran Duran. I love George Michael and Wham. I mean, why the hell not? Some of the greatest songs ever written, in my opinion. Why corner yourself in this tiny little environment of like similar-minded people? All they like is that one thing. That is not interesting to me at all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm exactly the same. I mean, I've got stuff on my playlist from Eva Cassidy right through to Metallica, AC/DC, and everything in between, even classical.
Absolutely, I love classical music. I mean, I've scored music for films. I've written songs for films. And you have to have a wide appreciation of music. Music is not a science. It doesn't belong to anyone. Anyone that says that they own it and understand it more than you are talking nonsense. This is your own personal interpretation of why you like it, and that's all you need to know. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone because you don't like a piece of music or you like a piece of music. It's what it makes you feel like. That's the magic of it, that's what I've always believed anyway.
So you've just announced starting this week or next week, isn't it? Really, you've just announced a 10-date tour for the album.
Yeah, it starts this Saturday in Buckley, in the Buckley Tivoli in North Wales. Yeah, looking forward to it. I mean, it's been a while, a couple of years,
I'll put the dates up on the screen now. So you've got Buckley, Stoke, Manchester, Glasgow, Newcastle, Leeds, Nottingham, Bristol, London, and Wolverhampton. So what's next for Wayward Sons after the tour? Are you just going to take a break, or is it working on the album?
Well, we're in an album cycle promotional situation, so we will continue to promote the record and doing interviews like this.
Yeah.
and just anticipating next year. I mean, we're opening downloading next year on the Friday on the main stage. So that's exciting.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and we've got various European festivals, and we're hoping there'll be some more headline dates at some point. But you know what? We'll just see what happens. I mean, we're in extraordinarily uncharted times, uncharted worlds at the moment. And so every day brings a new challenge. Every situation that you think you understand is changing at the moment. The record industry is in real difficulty. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. But the only thing that I care about and the only thing that matters is the music. And I do believe in it still. I still trust in the fact that if you make good music, you make great music, people will respond to it. And it just depends on how strong that response is, really.
Fantastic. Just very, very quickly before we end this, you touched earlier on that you're an art student. I love the artwork on the albums. Is that your handiwork by any chance?
Well, no, I don't draw that stuff. No, it's by a guy called Stuart Dilley. But I have, I've had a hand in the creation of it, just in terms of the concepts and all the rest of it, very much so from day one, because that was my love of those 1950s comics. That's where it really comes from. The sort of the amazing stories, the weird tales, those sorts of things. The pulp comic making sort of thing.
You kind of connected all the albums, haven't you, via that genre, really?
Totally.
Excellent. Listen, Toby, I really, really appreciate you doing this for me. And as I say, thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone and doing this.
No problem. You did very well. Thanks a lot.
You're a star, man. Appreciate that. Take care.
Hey, thanks a lot, Simon.
Good luck with the tour as well.